of the Constitution. He said, an inalienable right is a right which God gave to you and which no inferior power has a right to take away.
Wall Builders Live captures the ideas of the Founding Fathers and then applies those ideas to the issues of today. Sunday morning at 11:30 Central on American Family Radio.
My enemies will be made my footstool, and so will yours.
Are you suggesting that all of those people stand condemned? What about Jews? They stand condemned too?
Senator, I'm a Christian.
I understand you are a Christian.
Everyone has opinions about political issues and religious issues and sports issues.
The Jewish community that run America, run the government, run the world, own the banks.
James Comey says he did it by the book.
This is the guy who, remember, leaked his memos in order to make sure that a special counsel was created to investigate the president.
Stuff that is unbelievably disgusting that you would find in an adult bookstore. That's what they want every kid to know.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
And good Friday, everyone. Fred Jackson sitting in for Brian Fisher today. Well, kind of. Brian's on assignment, as we like to say in this business, but he's going to be joining us very shortly. Great to be with you today on this Mom's Day weekend. I don't just call it Mom's Day, but it's Mom's Day weekend. So if you haven't brought the card yet, folks, if you haven't bought the flowers or some special gift or whatever you're planning to do, you ought to be doing that right now, because the supply of Mom's Day cards, they kind of get scarce at about this time. So happy Mom's Weekend to all our moms listening out there today. And we love you here at American Family Radio. You know, we have a division here called 1 Million Moms. And Monica Cole heads that up, and she sent a real nice note out to her followers. And you moms, you're important to us. You're the hand that's on the cradle, and we love you. And we know the Lord is using you in a major, major way. And we appreciate you, not only on Mom's Day weekend, but every weekend. Hey, listen, we've got a packed show for you here today. I'm in studio with Jeff Reed and Rob Gardner. Chris Woodward from American Family News going to be joining us in just a few moments. But first, because Brian has so many friends, one of his good friends is the former FBI director, James Comey, guy Brian really likes. Well, you know, James Comey, the former and fired FBI director, he was on CNN last night, and with Anderson Cooper, they were doing a town hall. That's what they're calling it, a town hall. And somebody at that town hall asked him about FBI agents Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Now, I know Brian's been talking about them. We've been talking about them on the show, how they passed messages between one another. They really hated Donald Trump during the election campaign back in 2016, and even plotting and what they could do about that. And they really wanted Hillary Clinton to be elected. So anyway, we now know about all of this, you know, what was going on behind the scenes. And so former FBI Director James Comey at this town hall last night was asked about Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, whether they had discredited the FBI. You're probably not going to believe what he's going to say, but we're going to play it for you so you become a believer. Cut number 3.
What do you think should have been the consequences for Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and Andrew McCabe?
I thank you for the question. I think given the standards that we have, and especially we in the FBI have, there should have been and was severe discipline around their behavior. As Anderson said, very different episodes of behavior. Everyone has opinions about political issues and religious issues and sports issues. You can't bring them to work and have them affect your work. There have to be severe consequences.
Do you acknowledge that this whole episode with Strzok and Page, that it damaged the reputation of the FBI and perhaps tarnished the investigation?
Definitely. Yeah, very painful. It made us all look bad.
They just all look bad. Now just stop for a minute, folks. He's kind of glad they were disciplined. Guess who their boss was when they were doing all this? James Comey. And you're telling he was either ignorant of all that was going on, or he's completely knowledgeable about what they were up to, but is now trying to deny it. And I think what's going on here, folks, is that everybody knows Inspector General Michael Horowitz, who has been investigating the investigators, behind the Russian collusion Mueller investigation that went on for 2 years. James Comey and that bunch, they know that Michael Horowitz is coming up with his report on what was happening during James Comey's watch as FBI director. And now, there you heard it last night on CNN, James Comey trying to distance himself from all of this. That the bad guys were really these other agents like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, and he mentioned Andrew McCabe, former FBI director, who was also let go. Well, as I was saying, Brian Fisher is on the road today, but he's been doing some investigating, show prep, even though he's not hosting the show today. Still Brian's show. And Brian is joining us from a vehicle somewhere in America. Brian, are you with us? Brian Fisher, is he with us? Oh, no.
Thanks for having me on my own program. It's a real honor.
Oh, all right. Very good, Brian. All right, Brian, you've been doing some investigating. There's a whole lot more that's going on out there, according to some reporting that's coming out in the last 24 hours with regards to the Michael Horowitz report, which is coming out any day. You've got a couple of news stories for us. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just give you kind of the highlights there because this is extremely significant information. And again, like you said, this is just breaking in the last 24 hours. John Solomon is an outstanding investigative reporter for a website called The Hill. He's a real sober guy, good, solid journalist. And he is reporting this morning that some of the stuff came out of what you were talking about last night, but is reporting that the FBI knew 10 days before they filed their first application for a FISA warrant to spy on the Trump campaign, that the information in the warrant was false. It could not be verified. In fact, it was wrong. They knew that, who are we talking about here? That Christopher Steele, they knew at that point that he had been leaking stuff to the media, and the stuff that he had been leaking to the media about Trump and the Trump campaign was inaccurate. They knew this 10 days before they applied for the first FISA warrant. So that means that they knew that the information that was in the first FISA warrant that started this whole thing was wrong. It was inaccurate. And yet they verified that that all the information in the FISA warrant had been verified. They signed off on that deal. And Horowitz is determined, apparently, according to John Solomon, Horowitz is determined, and of the 4 FISA warrants that were submitted to the court, 3 of them were illegal. And I don't know if I haven't been able to research enough to find out if that's just because he hasn't had an opportunity to research the 4th one or hasn't come to a conclusion or whatever. But that was the FISA warrant that started the whole thing. I mean, there would be no Russia investigation if it were not for that FISA warrant. And now we are finding conclusively that the information in it was not only unverified, but it was false, and that the FBI knew it, which means the people that signed those FISA warrants, that's a legal document, and you're signing your name as a representative of the American government and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Department of Justice. You're signing this document, and all the information in this document is verified and true, to the best of my knowledge. And they knew that they were lying when they signed that.
So, Brian,
to do that.
Brian, I just want to. So, one of the signatures would have been James Comey.
Yeah, James Comey, Rod Rosenstein, those guys were in deep guano. I mean, somebody's going to go to a federal prison behind this. Could be James Comey, could be Rod Rosenstein, could be both of them.
Wow, that's incredible. Is
it
any wonder why James Comey is kind of singing and pointing the finger at other people right now.
Well, that's just shameful. I mean, holy Toledo, how corrupt is that? You're engineering this whole thing, and then you get caught with your hand in a cookie jar, and you're trying to point the finger at somebody else. So that tells you all you need to know about the character of James Comey. He's not going to take a bullet for the team.
No. Now you have another story for us involving George Papadopoulos.
Well, yeah. This guy was apparently contacted by the Obama administration to try to sink Trump's ship. And apparently, as a part of their sting on George Papadopoulos, they tried to bribe him for $10,000. They made a $10,000 bribe offer to him in a hotel room in Europe somewhere. Gave him $10,000 for a bribe. I'm not exactly sure the details there. I don't know if John Solomon knows. But anyway, George Papadopoulos turned him down and said, I'm not going to take it. He left the $10,000 on the bed in the hotel room and then flew back to America. When he got off the plane in America and went through customs, the customs agents wanted to know where the $10,000 was.
Ooh.
So that means the whole thing was cooked up. And so the customs had advance notice that he was bringing a $10,000 bribe with him in his luggage. So, the corruption on it, it's just starting to stink to high heaven. So anyway, I want to be sure you guys knew that going on air today, because that's pretty significant stuff that's coming out over the last 24 hours.
Brian, like I say, this starts to make a whole lot of sense with James Comey, the way he's talking about. I also extended to the Democrats. Is it any wonder they were so upset with the Mueller report that said there was no collusion and no indictments on obstruction of justice? And they're trying to retry that whole thing again with their subpoenas, trying to get William Barr in and others. I'm talking about Nadler. I'm talking about little Adam Shifty and all the rest. Nancy Pelosi talking about, lying and obstruction of justice and all this sort of thing. I think they know. The Democrats, James Comey, they all know what Michael Horowitz is coming out with.
Yeah, and I think you're right. They're trying to do a lot of preemptive work to try to blunt the effect of that thing, and it is not going to work. It's going to be too compelling. There's too much information out there. Too many people know now. They're not going to be able to kind of sweep this thing under the proverbial carpet. So they're in big trouble, and I think that they know it. One thing that Solomon said in his report is that Christopher Steele wanted to get this information out that was in the spice warrant. He wanted to get it out in a hurry. This was like middle of October. The election's coming up in November. We got to get this stuff, this dirt on Trump. We've got to get it into the public. We've got to get it into the media. And that's why there was this press to get all this information, this push to get this information in this FISA warrant, to get this FISA warrant and get the dirt on Trump before the election. And now the whole thing is just kind of completely blown up.
Brian, this is the kind of thing that, they write movie scripts around, and we go to movies and it's an incredible movie. But what's shocking is this could actually have been happening in this country under Barack Obama and his Justice Department.
Yeah. Well, and it's phenomenal, and it's phenomenal how close they came to actually being successful in launching a coup against the sitting president and overturning a valid election result. Just kind of amazing stuff. And I think that, they've got nothing else here. That's the other thing, Fred, is they're going to get increasingly desperate now because they've got nothing else. The Mueller thing blew up their whole impeachment deal. So now that they've got nothing, the truth is coming out now about these FISA warrants and the Trump surveillance, and they don't have anything else. So I think they're getting increasingly desperate. It's going to be kind of fascinating to watch what their moves are going to be from this point forward.
Hey, Brian, you take care of yourself, and I know you'll have more to say on this when you're back in the chair here on Monday. But thanks for joining us. We sure appreciate it.
Okay, you're sure welcome. Are Fred and Rob back? Rob and Jeff back?
No, we're here.
Oh, they're here too. Yeah.
All right. Well, I miss y'all. See you on Monday.
All right.
See you Monday, boss.
All right. Takes three of us to take care of things for Brian. Hey, listen, this is fascinating stuff. By the way, Brian's source on that, if you want to read it for yourself, is American Thinker, AmericanThinker.com. You need to go and read this stuff, folks, because as I was saying, I am convinced the Democrats know the corruption that's going on behind the scenes and has been for the last several years. And they're worried sick that Michael Horowitz, Inspector General, is going to make this public. Hey, listen, you're listening to Focal Point. Fred sitting in for Brian. We're back with much more right after the break.
And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. A retired judge seeking the appointment of a special prosecutor to investigate exactly what led Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx's office to drop charges against Empire actor Jussie Smollett has subpoenaed Fox, her chief deputy, and Smollett to appear at a hearing to discuss the case. The Chicago Sun-Times reported that retired Cook County Appellate Judge Sheila O'Brien filed a petition demanding the appointment of a special prosecutor to investigate Fox's office. O'Brien argued Fox misled the public concerning the Smollett case. She now seeks to rectify what she perceives as a public miscarriage of justice.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. This Sunday is Mother's Day. This is the day we pause to express our appreciation for our mothers. It has always been one of my favorite days of the year. My mom went home to be with the Lord in January of 2016 at the age of 92. This will be my fourth Mother's Day without her. I miss her, but I'm so grateful that God gave me the mother that He did. My mother is the one who taught me that God loves me, that Jesus died for me, and God has a wonderful plan and purpose for my life that no one could fulfill as well as I could with His help. I've often said that nobody loves you like your mother except God. A mother's love is sacrificial and unconditional. God bless them, everyone. If your mom is still alive, tell her how much you love her and appreciate her. And husbands, tell the mother of your children how grateful you are that they are your children's mother, and what a great mother she is. My younger brother has been sending me various things from my mom since she passed away, and one of them was a card that I gave her the last year that she was with us. I gather from relatives that it was evidently pretty clear to even a casual observer that I was the apple of my mother's eye, but I was sometimes a difficult child, aided and abetted by being hyperactive, attention deficit disorder. Let's put it this way. If they had had Ritalin when I was a kid, they would have marinated me in it. So the card that I sent my mom, which I now have back, said, "Sometimes God knew I would need a mom just like you. Some days it must have taken all of your patience, faith, and sense of humor, but I hope I have been worth it. Thanks for loving me, Mom, no matter what. You are God's gift to me and a blessing in my life. All my love, Richard." I know somewhere in heaven my mom is now enjoying the heaven she taught me about when I was a boy. Mom, I love you. I look forward to seeing you again someday. Happy Mother's Day. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
And welcome back to the Friday edition of Focal Point. Even when Brian's not here, he's here.
He's always on.
I'll tell you what. Hey, listen, great to be with you today. So much news going on today. You know, I remember years ago when James Dobson was first still on Focus on the Family and head of that ministry way back. And I think he actually grew up in California. But I remember at some point he encouraged, and like I said, this is years ago, he encouraged parents in California to get their kids out of the public school system there because he recognized how bad things were. Well, and we do a number of stories on stuff happening out there. I remember there was a case last year where parents were not told about certain things that were going on at their kids' schools. And they were basically told by the school district, this was up somewhere north, I think, of Sacramento, that too bad, we're going to teach your kids anything that we want. And by the way, we don't have to tell you, inform you, what we're going to be teaching these kids. And it was of a sexual matter. It was horrible. But now we have a new story this week, and it's gone beyond one school district. This is the whole state of California that is bringing forward a new sex ed education program that resulted in hundreds of parents literally circling the Capitol building in Sacramento yesterday after they found out what the state wants to teach their little kids, and I'm talking kids as young as kindergarten, 5 years old and on. Now, our reporter, Chris Woodward, has been keeping an eye on this all this week. He joins us in the studio right now. Chris, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's hard to follow up Brian. It's like the Monkees, finishing up after Led Zeppelin or something, but yeah.
All right, Chris, but this is a big story also. So tell us where we are with all of this. First of all, what is the magnitude, basically, of this sex education program? Take us through on it. I know there's some things so bad you can't talk about on the air.
Yeah,
right?
Got to keep it family friendly, so I'll do my best. But basically, the California Department of Education approved what are called guidelines for public school teachers that encourage classroom discussions about things like gender identity and sexual orientation and LGBT relationships. But I've got 4 sources that say it goes beyond the vanilla sounding things, their terms. It actually involves materials, images, techniques for things that people might do in their own time together or alone. So it's basically borderline pornography, as Patricia Reyes, 45-year-old mother of 6, told Fox News. And I've got sound from 3 different people, all of which were part of those rallies that you mentioned in opposition to this. Let's begin with Brenda Lebsack. This is going to be clip 9. Brenda is a teacher in Southern California. She went to the rally to speak out against this, and she said that this actually would impact charter school students as well. And I bring that up because a lot of people are under the impression that charter schools are completely left alone. They can do their own thing. But Brenda says that's not exactly the case.
Private schools that do not get any kind of public funding, as of now, they are free to choose, the kind of curriculum they want to choose. It all comes down to public funding. Charter schools get public funding. They're not private. So they have to comply with the California Healthy Youth Act in order to stay funded by the state. And also when it comes to homeschooling, there's different kinds of homeschooling. Some homeschools are chartered through public funds. Those homeschool have to comply to the state laws. And they follow the same kind of curriculum that, there might be more leeway as far as what parents choose, but they still have to go with the state-mandated curriculum. And then other homeschoolers are private.
Now, if you're listening to this and you just heard what she said, you might be thinking, what about my religious rights? What about my parental rights? I'm Johnny's father. I'm Susie's dad. I should be able to have a say. Brad Dacus at Pacific Justice Institute feels the same way. This is clip 7. Dacus told me this is a serious blow to religious freedom and parental rights.
We at Pacific Justice Institute have spoken out against this. We testified against this. We were at the rally at the state capitol yesterday. Needless to say, we're not finished with this. As it's implemented, we want parents to contact us to make sure that their constitutional rights are, in the end, respected and protected.
And, I run into a problem sometimes when I do stories on California where people tune it out and they think, oh, that's California. They should just leave the union and do their own thing, and we should not have to, listen to the things they do here. But I want to do clip 8. This is Greg Burt of California Family Council, another group that went to these rallies to speak out against these guidelines. And Greg told me that parents in other states ought to be paying attention here.
Different states are pushing what they're calling comprehensive education, sex education. They're pushing comprehensive sex education, and you think, well, okay, that sounds good. It's going to be accurate. It's going to be, make sure kids are informed. They never tell you the details of what they mean by comprehensive. And so now that California is actually getting to the nitty-gritty details of what they mean comprehensive. They mean every sexual behavior, stuff that is unbelievably disgusting that you would find in an adult bookstore. That's what they want every kid to know. We know that it's spreading in Colorado, in the East Coast. this is a statewide movement to push comprehensive sex education statewide. So parents have got to be vigilant around the country, because you know what starts in California spreads.
And you know what's really troubling about all this, Fred, is the fact that this began with the California Department of Education. So many, if not all of these individuals responsible for these decisions are unelected. It's not a simple matter of, well, I'm going to primary that representative or senator that approved this garbage.
Yeah.
You can't get rid of these people.
No.
And a lot of people in California, as we have talked about in other unrelated discussions, a lot of people in California go to other states.
Yeah.
A lot of times they bring their politics with them, or they take a job at the Department of Education and they push for these kinds of things. What do you guys think?
I'm wondering, is there a possibility that parents can opt out of this?
Yes, Brad Dacus at Pacific Justice Institute says parents can opt out, and he invited people to go to the Pacific Justice Institute website and download the free opt-out forms. Now, I can't guarantee you that if you were to go to the website and you printed those out and you handed them to the principal or the teacher or the superintendent or something, you're not going to have some uphill battle at that point still. But if you aim for nothing, you'll hit it.
You know, it's and this last point, your last individual that you spoke with, the interview, that is something that we have to drive home. This is not just a California agenda, it's a national agenda. And, you know, we've done a number of stories, disturbing stories over the last few years, for instance, of men dressed as women being brought into public libraries to read stories to little kids. I mean, I call it satanic. This is what it is. It's satanic. It is sexual perversion being imposed on our kids as young as 4 and 5 years old.
Yeah.
That's satanic.
Yeah, it's the only explanation. And, you know, again, it goes beyond the gender identity or the sexual orientation or LGBT relationships that even Fox News described it as. It's pornographic stuff. I mean, there were terms and descriptions used in interviews that I won't share here. It was gross. It would make you sick.
Yeah.
Some of the things that I heard. Greg was very kind in his description there. I mean, these are really gross things that God frowns upon.
Yes.
And they're being taught to kids as young as 5.
You know, here's the thing, though. You know, Jeff, you asked a really good question about can parents opt out. But the other problem is, as I mentioned this story we did last year in another jurisdiction in California, the local school board decided, even after parents found out, they protested, they went to school board meetings, and then the school board in the middle of the summer decided, no, we don't have to even inform the parents that we're going to teach your kids this stuff. So, I mean, the only solution I think is that you, mom and dad, you have got to constantly query your kids when they come home from school. What did they do at your school today? What did they teach you? Also, you've got to pinpoint those members of the school board, whatever that takes, go into a school board meeting and demand that you want to know what's being taught. In this case, in particular, anything related to sex ed.
Right. Hey, kids as young as 5. Like, I mean, just... You know, you need to be learning to color, and you need to, you know, your left from right, and maybe you learn some cursive writing. I know my...
How about some reading and arithmetic?
Yeah, things like that. Not 2 men might be able to marry, you know, things like, and do other things. I mean, there, and even Greg was quoted in the Fox News article as saying, not everything under the sun needs to be taught to our kids with no moral judgment. So it's not the school's responsibility to raise your kids. And it kind of brings us back to, you need to talk to the kids at the dinner table about what did they learn in school. You need to make sure that your kid knows what's going on, what the Bible says, and be prepared for the classroom so that it's not your teacher's job to raise the kid.
I think it would be, we have to realize that even if these parents opt their kids out, these kids are going to be taking the information they get and sharing it with everybody in the school.
Yeah.
That right there, you know, is that's horrible.
The environment that should be at a school, especially we're talking little kids, the environment should be that they're never going to be threatened. And I use that word, threatened, with exposure to this information. They ought to be taught at home. Mom and dad ought to be doing this kind of thing. And certainly there ought to be a total ban on discussing any of these issues, I think, until a kid is plus 12 years old.
Yes,
Not
junior high.
little boys and girls.
And and imagine the uphill battle that a youth pastor in California is now going to face.
Oh my goodness.
It seems to me like there's people sitting in prison right now for sharing these type of materials.
Yeah.
But because they brought it through the Capitol building of the state of California, everything seems to be okay with that. That doesn't make any sense.
And as he mentioned, he said we're seeing it in Colorado, we're seeing it on the East Coast. I mean, Colorado Springs is like the evangelical capital of the world.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's in faith-friendly places. It's not just in secular, ungodly California anymore. It's going other places. It'll at some point. It's not a matter of if, but when. This will be in Texas. It'll even be in Mississippi. I guarantee you.
Yeah, and before we just wrap this session up, I just want to say once again, I know there are really good, solid Christians teaching in our public school system. I know there are public school systems that overall are still vigilant about this to the extent that they can be. But here is the problem, and it really came to the forefront during the Obama administration, that federal education dollars will be withheld from your district unless you do A, B, and C.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because next Thursday there's an organization called Informed Parents of California that's actually urging a student sit-out. They're asking parents, hey, keep your kids at home, don't send them to school today, in protest of what just took place with the California Department of Education. Because as even Greg Burt told me, those schools get money depending on how many heads are in the classroom that day. So if all of a sudden there's not very many students in school that day for whatever reason, that school's not getting any money, or they're getting less money. So there are efforts in the next few days to try to, hit these schools financially where it hurts here.
One of the options, and I know the homeschool movement is growing across the country. Homeschool Legal Defense is a great place to go to get information on this. And also, you probably can find homeschool groups in your area that are well developed. And, immediately a lot of parents say, well, are they going to get a good education, socialization, and all these sorts. The homeschool movement has grown so much that they now have experts who will teach a group of homeschool students, for instance, science or political science, mathematics, all these kinds of things. So, Mom and Dad, you really have to kind of think about this, particularly if you're in a school district where they're going to say, we're going to teach your kids anything that we want.
Yeah. I can't speak for the IQ of every homeschooler, but I know a lot that have graduated early because it was a concentrated program that they were doing and they worked ahead. And certainly, you have to wonder sometimes, like, who started that rumor, I'll call it, that homeschool is bad, or it's, your kid's not not going to get it smart. Is it the school that the homeschool is competing with? You can't tell me. You might say, well, you can't prove that, but you can't unprove it either.
Yeah, exactly. And also there are some good Christian schools that have been started that are associated with the church, or a group of churches get together and they're starting schools. I've always said, I think it's a tremendous waste of resource when we have big churches and they have, 14, 15 classrooms that are used for 1 hour a week.
Yeah.
Shouldn't churches, and I'll just throw that out there, shouldn't more churches start thinking about, in the interest of protecting the souls of our little boys and girls, at least we're going to start a school that takes them up to grade 6.
Yeah.
Do something with the facility that God has blessed you with.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. These buildings sit empty all week, not being used. You spent millions of dollars to create them, and they sit empty all week while your school, your kids in your church are going off to be exposed to this kind of junk.
Sure. And the Bible says people in the early church, they were in the temple daily.
Yeah.
They were they weren't always just talking about worship. They were communing together.
Exactly.
Which is what a church could do with the school.
Well, Chris Woodward, we thank you very much. You're going to be on top of this and covering it. This is unfolding across the country. We'll keep you informed as much as we can, folks. But it comes down to, Mom and Dad, you have to be vigilant about finding out what's going on in your schools. And yes, You may have to make the tough and financially demanding decision at some point. You're going to get your kids out of that system. You only get one round with your kids, folks. You're listening to Focal Point. Fred Jackson sitting in for Brian Fisher today. There's much more ahead on this Friday edition of Focal Point. Don't go away.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I was finishing undergrad and got credit cards because I couldn't work full-time. So that started the credit card journey for me.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
And then when I got married, we combined our credit card debt and it became impossible to pay off on our own. At that point, I was like, I don't know where to turn. And then I found Trinity.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
I initially was scared to call, and immediately I felt relief. I mean, in a matter of 3 years, we've already paid down $20,000 in credit card debt, which is huge.
Call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813.
The number 7 is the number of completeness. The number 6 is the incomplete number. The number 6 represents the inability of man to measure up to number 7 without God.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Signs next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Love sings.
You know, ignorance is not bliss. We must know our enemy's strategies.
Like a good song, marriage requires the right balance of melody, harmony, and rhythm. Longtime friends of the American Family Association, Barbie and Terry Franklin, share stories and music in their new DVD set, Love Sings, The Artistry of Marriage.
It'll change your marriage like this.
Produced by American Family Studios, Love Sings is now available at afastore.net.
Happy birthday to you.
In states like New York, Virginia, and Vermont, radical legislation has been written legalizing abortion late in pregnancy when babies can feel pain and are able to live outside the womb.
Happy birthday to you.
They've gone even further, repealing protections of infants born alive, allowing killing even after birth.
Happy birthday, dear.
Tell Congress to protect babies who survive abortion by supporting the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Act. Call your representative today at 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. A baby who survives abortion should have a chance to live.
Happy birthday to you.
A message from AFA Action.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
And we are back. Fred Jackson sitting in for Brian Fisher today. At this very moment, I'm looking at a picture. I know we're on radio. I'll try to describe it to you, but it is hundreds of people today, and this is in the last few hours, folks, surrounding a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic in Philadelphia. Now, what's going on here? Well, it involves, this is a reaction, folks, to a Democratic state lawmaker by the name of Brian Sims and some things that he's been doing over the last week to intimidate a pro-life demonstrator that was quietly demonstrating outside that clinic. Jeff Reed, your Reed report is all about this today.
Yeah, State Republican Brian Sims took on a self-styled type of activism against a mother and two young girls. One girl was 13, the other was 15. Her daughters were praying in front of that abortion clinic. Not only did he harass them and videotape the whole thing, very proud of it, He also encouraged and offered money for anybody that would dox, give out public information on not only the mother, but the children as well, which is pretty, well, we'll just leave it there. Inadvertently, he has helped the pro-life cause. He has drawn a lot of attention to this, the family. So first of all, from the father of these two young girls and the husband of the woman, he's pretty upset about it. He said he wants to talk to him. He should be talking to him first if he's got any problems with his wife and daughters. But also, he started a GoFundMe account where 100% of this is going to go to the pro-life movement there in that area, and all that money will be used to host more prayer vigils and outreaches to nearby abortion clinics. Also provides thousands of diapers, wipes, articles of clothing for babies, and resources to mothers in need. Also operates home care for expecting mothers. So at the time of this story, their goal was $100,000. They've surpassed that. Last time I checked was this morning around 9 o'clock, and it was already at $117,000.
Wow!
So that's pretty cool. Also, Matt Walsh. Some people are familiar with him. Very talented writer. He decided to join this rally here and invited Brian Sims to bring his camera and come out there and meet him. No word yet as if he did show up. I rather doubt it.
Yeah. Well, Sims apparently he is somewhat efforted to make an apology for his behavior. I mean, you probably, if you watch Fox News, you've seen that what you just described, him harassing this woman who was standing peacefully. She didn't turn and start arguing or fighting with him. She was just there peacefully trying to draw attention to what's going on inside that clinic, the killing of unborn babies. And he just went ballistic over this. He's gotten a lot of trouble with it, a lot of flack. He has attempted to apologize, but at this point it's not working. You know what's interesting about this image I just alluded to a moment ago? Lots of young people.
Yes.
Lots of young people. And I'm not exaggerating, folks. We're talking hundreds surrounding this clinic. And they're not breaking down the doors. They're not doing any damage. So
a lot of smiles.
Yeah, there are a lot of smiles there. And the goal of these demonstrators, these protesters, whatever they're referred to, is really to draw attention to what's going on. The goal is really to, at the very least, and I wish our federal lawmakers would finally get there, stop funding Planned Parenthood and put them out of business. Because everybody knows the major moneymaker for Planned Parenthood around this country, it's not testing women for diseases. It's for killing unborn babies. That's what it's all about. That's why Planned Parenthood in the last election cycle spent millions of dollars hoping and trying to elect Democrats. That's what they do. Oh, yeah, by the way, yeah, they do spend millions of dollars, folks.
Yeah, we are seeing an increase of people either verbally or even physically attacking pro-life events, people with pictures out or even just signs.
College campuses, pro-life groups being attacked.
It really makes you wonder. I mean, this goes beyond just being being triggered.
Yeah.
It makes you think that there's really a spiritual
absolutely
aspect to this. And you think about it. That's it.
I believe, Satan is behind abortion. There's no question about it. God hates it. Satan wants, and anything that God hates, Satan wants to promote and his people. But pray for these folks. Pray for the folks that are working in the clinic. We know their minds and hearts can be changed.
Amen.
Hey, listen, that's been proven over and over again. So pray for these folks and pray for, Democrat Sims, that his heart through all of this could be. Because you know what? These folks that are demonstrating outside this clinic in Philadelphia today, they would welcome the opportunity to sit down and talk with him about what really abortion represents, the death of unborn babies and the murder of unborn babies. So let's pray for these folks and not forget that. All right, deception unfortunately, is a big part of our political theater today. And one of the examples has come to the forefront over the last several months, claims by Democrats when they lose that their candidate lost because of what they refer to voter suppression. All right? That's what they call it, voter suppression. Now, what does that mean? The allegation is that some people were kept from voting for their candidate, and therefore that candidate, and again, I only hear this exclusively from Democrats. Democrats, including Kamala Harris. Senator Kamala Harris from California is one of those who would like to be the next president of the United States. Now, she was at a town hall or an event just recently where she made claims that a Democrat lost in states like Georgia and Florida because, and she's referring mainly to the black vote, that folks, African Americans, were not allowed to vote. Therefore, the Democrat candidates lost. So, cut number 5, Kamala Harris.
Let's say this loud and clear. Without voter suppression, Stacey Abrams would be the governor of Georgia. Andrew Gillum is the governor of Florida. So the truth is, we need a new Voting Rights Act.
All right, that was Kamala Harris saying the truth is. Well, Jason Riley, he's a columnist. He is, by the way, African American as well. He has written a column, and it can be found on the Wall Street Journal. And the title of this column is Data Disprove the Voter Suppression Myth. Now, I can't read the whole thing. It's fairly long. But here's the crux of it. Is voter suppression happening in this country amongst minorities, whether it's African American, Hispanic? The answer, according to the facts, is no. Now, this is what Jason Riley, amongst other things, says. It just so happens, I'm quoting now from his article in the Wall Street Journal, it just so happens that 2 weeks ago, the Census Bureau released a report on voter turnout in 2018, which climbed 11 percentage points from the last midterm election in 2014 and surpassed 50% for the first time since 1982. Moreover, he continues, the increased turnout was largely driven by the same minority voters Democrats claim are being disenfranchised. Now hold on to your seats, folks. Here are the facts. Black turnout, reading from the article still, black turnout grew around 27%, and Hispanic turnout increased about 50%. An analysis of the census data published by the Pew Research Center, the Pew Research Center is not a conservative group. Pew Research, they do polling, found that, quote, all major racial and ethnic groups saw historic jumps in voter turnout last year.
It's incredibly irresponsible to be out there saying this, but this is how Democrats try and motivate their voters. They try and keep them paranoid and angry to get them out to the polls. But I think you're right. Democrats need to learn how to lose an election without playing the race card. And this merely continues a pre-existing trend. We've seen an increase in minority voter turnout go up gradually since the 1990s under Bill Clinton. And what's interesting is that this has happened even as more and more states have passed voter ID laws and other ways to ensure voter integrity. What we've seen is an increase in minority turnout. And what we saw in the midterms last year was a historic high. When blacks are motivated to turn out, when Hispanics are motivated to turn out, they do so. And with these Democratic candidates that Kamala Harris is complaining about and others are complaining about, simply did not motivate people to turn out in the numbers that they needed in order to win.
That was Jason Riley, as I say, the writer of this column, which occurs on the Wall Street Journal. Hey, listen, folks, and let's remember, the former Attorney General, Eric Holder, has already announced that There's some talk that he was going to run for president. He said he's not going to do it. His raison d'etre, his reason for living right now, is to go around the country preaching this false gospel that somehow there is voter suppression out there. There you just heard Kamala Harris saying people are, and keep in mind, record turnouts of African American voters, Hispanic voters. Now, I'm not naive enough to believe that they voted Republican. Most of them probably voted Democrat, but they certainly weren't suppressed. Now, if Kamala Harris and others who quote they're preaching this falsehood want to say we failed to get the numbers from these groups out that we wanted, that's fine. But don't say Republicans in charge of various state governments, they are the reason. They are disenfranchising. They are stopping people who would vote for us from even voting. Now, let's be very clear. The attempts that are being made here, folks, basically involve, hey, listen, you have to have proper ID to show up when you show up to vote. Imagine that. You have to be on a voting registered list. Basic things. But, of course, we know the Democrats, amongst other things, they'd like people in the country illegally to vote. Bernie Sanders wants the felon in prison, murderers still in prison, to be able to vote. This is crazy, really crazy. Hey, listen, we're running out of time here. I have one more story I want to talk to you about. Louis Farrakhan. Facebook has booted him off of Facebook finally because of the hatred that he spews against Jewish people. All right? Well, last night, believe it or not, he spoke at a Catholic church in Chicago. He was invited to come in and speak at a Catholic church in Chicago, where he announced, I don't hate Jewish people. What nonsense. Just go to YouTube, folks. Put Farrakhan Jews in. You will find multiple examples of what Louis Farrakhan has said. He speaks in mosques. He speaks at various groups around the country. Here's just one example. I think this one came from 2015, as I recollect.
I believe that's right.
2015. This is Louis Farrakhan talking about the Jews. Cut number 2.
Talking about the wicked ones in the Jewish community that run America, run the government, run the world, own the banks, own the means of communication. They are my enemies. But as sure as I'm alive, my enemies will be made my footstool. And so will yours.
There you have it. There's classic Louis Farrakhan, Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan. Number one, I don't know what's going on with this Catholic church in Chicago inviting this guy in to speak. Unbelievable that they would do that. Apparently the diocese up there is upset with this particular Catholic church. Doesn't matter. He's given a platform, and he says he doesn't hate Jews. That's just one example, folks, of how this guy speaks on a regular basis. Don't praise Facebook very often, but finally getting this guy and banning him from doing this kind of thing.
They initially identified him as a far right.
A far right, yeah. They called him a far right. There's an agenda in that, too.
Yeah.
Let's be very clear about that, trying to lump him in with conservatives. But I'll tell you what, folks, you need to be aware of this kind of thing. That's why we are here at American Family Radio. That's why Brian Fisher is here every day at 105 Central on Focal Point, and our other shows doing the same thing, bringing truth to light so that you can make decisions based on the truth. Amen. All right. Our pleasure to be here. It's just a blessing, folks, to be able to come to you each day, and you help make it possible. Have yourself a great weekend. As I said off the top of the show, be special to Mom this weekend, folks. Be real nice to her because she's special to you year-round. Fred Jackson sitting in for Brian today. It's been a real treat. We'll see you again real soon. Bye for now.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.